Hey, everybody. Hey, let's see. Are we live yet? I don't. There we go. Okay. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining me for another edition of Martial Talks. Today, on this episode, I want to talk about what does it mean to be a black belt. And also, I will be taking any questions that come in and just generally talking about martial arts. So if you have any questions you want to talk about with the martial arts or anything you just want to chat about and discuss, I am more than willing to answer your questions. I don't claim to be an expert in all matters, but only an expert in most matters. So if you're interested in talking about whatever you want to talk about, I don't care. It's all good. So, what does it mean to be a black belt? It's a very interesting question. As I've talked in the last couple of episodes, I have never officially given out a black belt yet. And I talked about that in being stingy with rank. And it's very important that people understand that when you give that rank of black belt or the equivalent to black belt, that you are really endorsing that person. You're putting your name, your own name on the line. And so it means a lot. Now, of course, a lot of styles don't have black belts. As a matter of fact, JKD, which is the style I'm most familiar with and associate myself with the most, doesn't have a black belt. However, I guess you can ask black belt or equivalent to black belt, because that's kind of what you would ask. You would be like, does it, like, yeah, I know we don't have belts, but what does it mean to be a black belt in this? What's the equivalent of a black belt in this system? And every system kind of, because that's so popular, that black belt thing is so popular, every system kind of has its equivalency degree, even though they might not necessarily call themselves a black belt, whether or not like it's an instructor degree, or you're now in the advanced class, or you can open up your own studio, or you can do whatever, that whatever you want. I've never awarded it, as I've previously said, but I actually have what I consider to be a black belt certificate in what I do that I would award to somebody if they had achieved it. And it's different than a teacher certificate as well. Okay, so those two things are different. Now, you can't be, in my opinion, you can't be a full-blown teacher and not be a black belt or the equivalent of a black belt. But you can be the equivalent of a black belt or a black belt and not necessarily be a teacher, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like, all horses have four legs, but not all four-legged animals are horses. So some people are the equivalent of black belt and they're competent to open their own studio, but those two things don't necessarily coincide together, okay? And I wouldn't necessarily have somebody endorse somebody opening up their own studio only under maybe stringent circumstances where there was no studio and be a full instructor. Okay. So those two things don't necessarily now you can be a junior instructor or what's called a student instructor up until you get your black belt or equivalent to black belt, and then you can be both. You can be an instructor and the equivalent of a black belt or a black belt. But you can be a black belt without being an instructor. I don't think those two things necessarily coincide together. And the reason is because people can have a performance level, but not be very good at passing that performance level on to other people. So I don't do that. I have the degree where somebody is what I would call a practitioner, but not a but not a full instructor. A full instructor means not only can you do the curriculum, but you are competent in your teaching ability to reproduce that curriculum and explain that curriculum thoroughly in other people. Okay, so that aside, what does it mean to be a black belt or equivalent of a black belt? And remember, the importance of that is when somebody confers on you that level, they're saying something about themselves. And that could be why sometimes instructors can be a bit stingy, but I don't think I am. I have not really had a student who has achieved a level that I would be comfortable in giving that rank to. So what does it mean to be a black belt? Okay, so it means a couple things. It's not one thing. It's a collection of things that kind of come together to create what I would consider to be that level. Okay. It's like water. Think of it like water. You know, we're all in the Bruce Lee, think of it like water, but think of it like water in this way is another analogy. Water is made up of H2O, but not every time you see hydrogen and oxygen around or even together, you have water. It has to come together in a particular way. And when it comes together in a particular way, then you have water. Well, the same thing is with the black belt. When it comes together in a particular way, you have water. Now, generally, most systems require a couple of things. They require that you show proficiency, a certain level of proficiency with the basics and the advanced understanding of your system. Okay, so you have to show. So being a black belt means you understand your system and you can demonstrate your understanding in a physical manner. Okay. So, and a lot of times the advanced, the intermediate, and the advanced stuff is really just repackaged beginner stuff. That's what I find across the board. I don't really find too many exceptions to that. You might find a new trick here and there in the advanced section, but really your intermediate and your advanced is really just beginner stuff, maybe more complicated in different scenarios. So that's number one, what it means to be a black belt. It means you have a proficient ability to perform the basics of your system and to perform those on an advanced level, okay? Let me give you an example of that. So it's not just all highfalutin kind of stuff. I would say the example of that is that, like, you can throw a front kick, for example, like if you come from a Tang Soo Do or a Taekwondo school, you have a certain snap in your front kick. Not only can you throw a front kick, but you can do combination moves. You can throw a front kick to a round kick. Okay, if you're a boxer, you can throw combinations back out of that range and then throw more combinations. Okay, that would be, I don't know. I think boxing might be the only one that doesn't have an equivalent to black belt, although they could beat a lot of black belts, in my opinion. But for me, if I confer on you the level of black belt or the equivalency of, this is what it really means. It means I trust you enough now to train yourself. That's bottom line. What it means to me to be a black belt is you have mastered your own body enough on a physical level that you can now apply the JKD model to other systems, which is absorb what's useful for you, rejects what's useless to you, and come up with what is uniquely your own, being creative with your own self. And I would say that is across the board. If I am looking, and even as somebody who isn't in JKD, but if you are, let's say you're, a Shotokan and you're a black belt, I would say that person, although they might not want to, I would say that person should exhibit a level of mastery over their own body and mastery over their own senses to the level that they can evaluate other systems. Like if I threw that person into, let's say another school, let's say I threw a Shotokan person into a Wing Chun school. After a certain amount of time of him learning some certain stuff, he would be able to apply the motto: absorb what's useful, reject what's useless, and apply what is essentially your own, or and contribute what is essentially your own. I believe that is what makes you a black belt. When you don't have Well, no, nobody can tell you what to do. Okay. I mean, it's America in one sense. It's just like you can go and open up your own school, have your own techniques, call it whatever you want, award yourself, an 11th degree black belt, whatever you want to do. Okay. But for me, for a legitimate person to be a black belt that I would consider to be a black belt, uh, I would say that before that, you really don't have the right to train yourself. You're still under a tutor. It's the difference between being a child and being an adult. And there just comes a certain point where, okay, look, when you're a child, you're told, turn off the light, turn off the light. Your parents got to come in and tell you, turn off the light, because you're not the one paying for the electricity bill. Your parents are. But when you become an adult and you live in your own house and you go, well, I'll have the lights on as much as I want. Okay, you're an adult. You can turn it on. But then what you do is you realize, oh, this actually cost money and mom and dad weren't idiots. I need to turn off the light. Or if you make enough money to leave the lights on and run up the bill, that's your choice because you're an adult. You've made enough money. So to me, in the same way, that's what being a black belt is like. You kind of no longer fall under the tutelage of another person, at least in total. You no longer fall under the tutelage of another person, at least in total. But you've gotten to the point where you can decide for yourself because you can take on your own responsibilities. Again, another analogy would be like health food. Your parents tell you as a child, no, you can't eat all the chocolate bars you want. You just can't do it. You can't eat. Yeah. Okay. Eat your vegetables, eat your fruits, eat your proteins. And after dinner, you can have one piece of cake, right? Because a kid will just eat as much cake as they want and then get sick. But as an adult, it's like, okay, you're an adult now. You make your own decisions. I've granted you the ability to be an adult, and now you're making your own decisions. You move out, you pay for your own food. If you want to eat 7 birthday cakes, eat 7 birthday cakes. But you'll experience the consequences of that, right? So in the same way, I have to tell you, no, this is how you throw a front kick. No, this is how you throw a back knuckle. No, this is how you throw the straight blast. No, this is how you parry. Your arm's in a wrong place for a gong sao. You say, well, why do I have to learn this kick? Because it's part of the curriculum. When you get to the point where you're proficient enough and you really don't like that kick, you can leave it out. It's up to you. But I have to judge that level. Somebody has to award you that level of proficiency. Somebody has to look at you and say, now, in one sense, if you're there, you're there. Okay, if you're there, you're there. Nobody has to award you your level of proficiency if you're there. But for the most part, if you went to a school, you are putting yourself under the tutelage of somebody else who you consider to respect, who you respect enough that you know that they're handing you their ranks based on their knowledge. Okay, that's the idea. And so if you come to my school, you have to learn a certain curriculum and you have to show proficiency with it enough. And you have to be able to spar with it enough. And you have to show a level of self-defense enough. And then the day comes where I go, okay, you're on your own. You have the level of proficiency. I had one student who preferred the boxing stance. He would stand like this, and he would stand a lot of times left leg forward, and his hands would be up here. Instead of standing with his strong leg forward in the on guard stance with his hands slightly down, as you do in JKD, and I had to keep reminding him, lower your hand, lower your hand. Don't fight like this. Lower your hand. Now he automatically did this. That was just his way of doing it. So I finally went to him and I said, look, try lowering your hand, because I realized he was getting close. He was probably one of the only ones who was as close to that level as I'd ever give him. And I said, look, try lowering your hand. Just give it a try. Be conscious of it. Maybe this is the way you fight best, and you'll decide that when you're done under my tutelage. You'll decide that. But for now, I would like you to give an honest try of standing in the on guard stance And if it works better for you, great. But for me, at some point, I have to say, all right, you're at a proficient enough level. If you really prefer hands up like this instead of hands down like this, I'm not going to tell you that's not JKD. That's not the technical curriculum of JKD, but that's JKD, because he is for himself absorbing what's useful, and for himself rejecting that which doesn't work for him, or not using that because it doesn't work for him as well as doing this. So for me, what it really means to be a black belt, in closing, I'll just kind of wrap this up here. Unless you have some questions, then I'll take questions. But honestly, what I think it means to be a black belt is it means that you have earned the right to apply the JKD motto to yourself. If I give you a black belt, I've said you've earned the right now to train yourself. You've earned the right to train yourself. I came up with a quote, and I put it up, and some people like it, some people don't like it. And this is my quote, okay? You don't need me. You don't need me. But once you realize you don't need me, you'll want me. Now, I don't mean anything weird by that, of course, but you'll want to train with me. And that's really kind of like I don't need this person. I don't need this. But once I realize that I have a self-sufficiency, I'll want to train with that person. I'll want to see what that person has to offer. Well, that's about it for me. Again, unless there's other questions, but I thank you for joining me on this web episode of Martial Talks, and stay tuned here. Again, more will come. And I'm actually going to be doing, starting up again the Empty Cup podcast real soon. We're going to start uploading more content here. I'm getting some new equipment, and things are looking good. And it's just a matter now of setting up guests and getting the time and uploading the new content to the YouTube page and the podcast platform. So it will be out soon. Okay. All right. Thanks again. And please subscribe to this channel. Please, like it and share it as well. It would really mean a lot to me. So thank you very much. And we will talk to you again soon.